Hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to look at the relationship between Macbeth and his wife Lady Macbeth. So what is it that is the conventional view? When you learn the conventional view, you get to grade 7, no bother at all. And then I'm going to teach you the unconventional or the deeper view, and that will take you to grades 8 and 9. Right, so there are basically 6 or 7 things that are traditional in our understanding of Macbeth's relationship with his wife. Number 1, she is seen as manipulative. She says, let me pour my spirits into thine ear. She's going to use the valour of her tongue to persuade him to kill Duncan. She also says he's too full of the milk of human kindness, so she understands what's going on in his mind and she knows how to probe for those weaknesses. What's his greatest weakness? Well, she says you are too full of the milk of human kindness, so she takes her own milk, turns it into gall, or she asks the murdering ministers to do that, so she can become poisonous to replace his goodness. What are the buttons that she presses? How does she convince him? Well, she talks about his cowardice a lot. She keeps referring to how a man should act. And then she has this extraordinary bit of emotional blackmail. You'll remember that Lady Macbeth has lost her child. Macbeth has lost his child, his only child. And it's happened recently because Lady Macbeth still has milk. And she says, I'd rather have dashed its brains out, this baby's brains out, than have broken the promise that you just made to me about killing Duncan. And that seems to propel Macbeth towards actually killing Duncan, when all his better instincts, that milk of human kindness again, are persuading him not to do it. Now, once he decides to go through with the plan, she makes it much easier for him because she knows he won't want to kill the king. So she says, look, I'll plan it, put this night's great business into my dispatch, she says, and then in an aside, and it's important that it's an aside because that means it's what's really in her mind. She's not telling this to anyone else on stage. This is actually what she believes. She says, had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. So she was actually prepared to kill Duncan herself, but her own goodness prevented her doing it. She saw that he looked like her father, and then Macbeth has to go through with it. Now, she leaves the daggers placed. She says, I've placed them there ready for him. He comes out having killed the king, filled with remorse, and that's when the relationship many people see as breaking down. He can't take the daggers back. Now she comes back to him again with these ideas of him being a coward. She says this is just a painting of your fear. She accuses him of being childish. And then finally she accuses him of cowardice, saying, I shame to wear a heart so white. So completely belittles him. And remember, he's just defeated the Norwegians that same day, only 12 hours ago. So this is a huge attack on his sense of self. And many people see this as the breakdown in the marriage. At the time where they've got what they want, Duncan's dead, is the very moment when it all falls apart because Lady Macbeth turns on her husband in this way. Next, we get these confrontations when she has to cover for him. So she has to feint to distract attention from the fact that he's killed the guards because he's gone against her plan. He's totally rejected everything that she's planned out and murdered the guards, which suddenly brings them both into suspicion. So she's furious with him at this stage. She has to do it again once he's killed Banquo and the ghost appears. She has to cover for him again in public in front of all the nobles, and she takes charge of the whole situation. This is a big deal in Shakespeare's time because court is where everything happens in public with all the most important nobility in the country. And when Macbeth gets that wrong, he loses the whole country. And he gets that wrong despite her best efforts. And again, the conventional view is the relationship totally breaks down here. She's doing everything she can to hold his kingship up, and he doesn't care anymore. He's just going out now to slaughter people. You'll remember that he doesn't tell Lady Macbeth that he's going to kill Banquo. He says, Be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck. He just simply pushes her aside. He's excluded her. They start to sleep apart, which we next see in the sleepwalking scene. So they are now sleeping apart, which is why Macbeth has never heard all this stuff that we see on stage. He just knows that she can't sleep. He wouldn't invite the doctor in if he had heard it, because this is her confessing, apparently, to the murder of Duncan and the murder of Banquo and the murder of Macduff's family. So Macbeth simply wouldn't invite anyone in to hear that. This is what people take as her overwhelming guilt, that she's committed this horrendous crime by persuading Macbeth to kill Duncan. She's ultimately responsible because it was her idea, and therefore she pays the ultimate price, which is madness, and therefore she pays the further price, which is suicide, and then she pays the further price, which is going to hell, which is what she deserves in Shakespeare's terms. And so this is the final disintegration of their marriage. And then we have Shakespeare getting the news of this. She dies off stage. We don't even see her die. And that's a symbol of how little Macbeth cares about her now. She dies off stage, and Macbeth doesn't even go to see the body. You know, this is his wife, the person whose dream he shared about becoming king and queen. He doesn't even go to see her dead body. And then he has this speech about life being but a walking shadow. So he's not really even talking about her. He's actually talking about his own life. He's kind of just dismissed her. She is just the brief candle who is now out. Okay, so that is the conventional view. Oh, this is a lovely halo effect. Let's see if I step back. Fantastic. In the next part of the video, I will show you how to go deeper, get the grades 8 and 9 with the unconventional, deeper view. Okay, so what is the unconventional view, Mr. Salles? Well, here it comes. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are passionately in love, and they stay passionately in love all the way to the end of the play. So let me show you how that works. First, we start with the letter. There is no reason for Macbeth to write a letter to Lady Macbeth in real life. There is a dramatic reason, because we get to see Lady Macbeth's reaction to the news, and we get to hear her soliloquy about how she wants to exploit her husband, and we get to hear her words telling us what she actually thinks about him. So there's a dramatic reason, but there also has to be a real reason within the world of the play, and it's this. Macbeth knows he's too full of the milk of human kindness, and he knows that she knows that. So what does he do? Well, he enlists her support, her manipulation, the skills he knows that she has, he asks for. So he writes a letter, and he sends a letter to her because he knows she will start plotting, because he knows she will start coming up with a plan to work on his weaker mind, this mind that will refuse to kill the king. So he's got a really cunning plan here, and he knows his wife will get him over this hurdle. This is the step which he must o'erleap. He knows Lady Macbeth will help him do that. And it's not so that he can then blame her when things go wrong. It's so that she will be his backup. She will force him to go forward with this action which he desperately wants, but ultimately is too scared to do. Now, when she starts accusing him of cowardice, she's not being vicious. She's voicing what's in his own heart. Macbeth feels like an imposter. Yeah, he's won this great victory against the Norwegians, but what if he now can't carry that through and get what he really desperately wants, which is kingship? In his own mind, that is not what a man of action would do. It's not what a warrior would do. And so he needs her to make him the man he wants to be. And he completely trusts her to do that. Now, let's go a little step further here into this relationship. They have both suffered this incredible trauma where their only child has just died. And that's tragic for anyone, but it's even more tragic for somebody who desperately wants an heir. It's even more tragic for somebody who's, let's face it, they're not really young people, and therefore they haven't had many opportunities to have children, and this one has died. So they're grief-stricken. How does Macbeth respond in his grief? Well, look at the description of him in battle. He tears off his helmet, gets rid of his shield, and he starts slashing through the Norwegians just with a sword. He is completely and utterly vulnerable at the same time as being totally savage. So what we have here is a man who is losing his mind to grief, and he's expressing it in bloodlust. Lady Macbeth can't do that. He hasn't done anything to help with her grief yet, but his solution is to offer her something to fill that gaping hole that's left by the dead child. And what he offers her is my dearest partner in greatness. He talks about the promise that is made to her by the witches. In other words, I'm going to make you queen. It won't give us another child, but it's the best that I can do. And it's a fantastic offer, isn't it? And it's made out of love. Well, now when she says to him this horrendous image that she would have dashed the brains out of her own baby rather than go back on the promise, she's not just appealing to all his emotional buttons there and savagely using his grief against him. She's saying, this is the grief that we both share, and this is the solution to us getting over that grief. Let's take what we can while we can. Again, it is a partnership that she's offering here, even though it sounds savage and horrendous. It's something they still share. The next thing we need to consider is the language that the characters use towards each other. So you're probably not aware that thee and thou, although they sound really formal to our ears, were terms of intimacy and affection in Elizabethan language. And if you wanted to be formal, you said you. So what happens to Lady Macbeth's language is, once Macbeth becomes king, his status is now right at the top of the social hierarchy. And even though she's married to him, she has to show him respect, and she constantly refers to him as you. We could argue that this leads to an imbalance in the marriage. They're no longer equal partners. He is now far superior to her, and that's even reflected in her own language to him in private. But don't despair. Macbeth still loves her, and so when he speaks to her, it's intimate, it's thee, it's thou. Prithee, he says to her many times. Intimate. You can, if you want a further level of complexity here, decide that that level of language is perhaps dismissing her as having a lower social status than him, so you can use it. So you can argue, if you want to, that he uses this language dismissively to kind of dismiss his wife. But I prefer this interpretation, that he still keeps that bond between them. Well, I can't just claim that on its own. I'd have to give you some other evidence. Well, here it is. When she sleepwalks, Macbeth brings the doctor in to try and save her. And he focuses on the state of her mind. He asks, I don't know, I've just had a message appear on my video. I'm going to leave it in if it appears. Anyway, he asks that the doctor cure her mind. And he does this while he's getting ready for battle. The doctor comes to see him on the battlements while he's telling Seward, bring me my armour, I want to put my armour on. In other words, he's just about to fight for his life, but who does he think about? He thinks about his wife and his wife's mental well-being. How extraordinary is that for any husband who's facing almost certain death on the battlefield? His thoughts are doing something right for Lady Macbeth. Now, what about this dismissive tone that I talked about earlier when Lady Macbeth dies? Well, let's look at the language again. It isn't dismissive. He likens her to a candle symbolic of the church, symbolic of light, symbolic of eternal life. And he says, look, she has been the light of my life, not just as a metaphor, the person who I love, but the light. She has been the goodness who has shown me the way. Extraordinary because they've become so evil, but in his own mind, she has shown him the way, and he's still in love with her. He's thankful of that. He doesn't look back on his life and think, God, if none of this had happened. He's actually worshipping his wife's influence on him. Well, how else has she influenced him in this scene? What he says is, out brief candles. 2 outs. Well, where did he get that language from? It's in Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene, where she says, out damn spot. He is becoming her. Now let's go even deeper here, because this is extraordinary. When she is sleepwalking, she is becoming him. What's my evidence for this? Well, first she starts obsessing about washing her hands and getting the blood off. Well, who did that in real life? Not Lady Macbeth. She went and washed it off. She said, little water clears us of this deed. Macbeth was the one who was fixating on this will all the great seas incarnadine, so I've got this blood and it's going to turn all of the seas in the world red. He is the one who thinks he couldn't wash it off. What other evidence is there? Well, she says, 1, 2, why then 'tis time to do it. That's her ringing on the bell. She herself would not say, why then it's time to do it, because it's the listener who's listening for the bell and then going, all right, it's time. Who's the listener? It's Macbeth. So in her sleepwalking scene, when she's feeling all this guilt, it's also Macbeth's guilt that she's feeling. She is empathizing with her husband. She's taking on his guilt, and that's what leads her towards suicide, realizing that the man she loves has got this gift of kingship, which is now worthless. So, totally unconventional view, but works perfectly with the text, and now you can take yourself from grade 7 up to grade 9. That's what my videos are for. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Keep watching, because I'll always show you how to get into the grade 9s. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're an existing watcher, you're already subscribed, thank you very much. See you soon.